Shalom and welcome to Walking the Walk, a linguistic analysis of the terms in Psalm 119. Today we will do the last of these words, the ninth word, which we will use the translation speech. The Colonel says you can't understand Hebrew unless you know what it says. Hebrew is constructed in such a way that words with similar letters have related meanings. By examining the related roots of each word, we come to a better understanding of what Hebrew words mean. The word is Imra, Strong's 565, and it is translated as word or speech, especially a speech from God. It is usually translated as logion in the Septuagint, and as we're going to see in a minute, the words davar and imra are used very, very similarly, and later on we'll explore the differences between them. Here is a list in Psalm 119 of the verses in which the word imra is used. Genesis 4:23. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. Deuteronomy 32:2. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. 2 Samuel 22:31. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of Yahweh is tried. He is a buckler to all that trust in him. Psalm 138:2. I will worship toward thy holy temple and praise thy name for thy loving kindness and for thy truth, for thou hast magnified thy word above all thy name. Imra comes from a verb root, amar, which means to speak, say, think in one's heart, or promise. Genesis 1:3. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. Genesis 43:28. And they answered, Thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. Exodus 8:27. We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to Yahweh our God, as he shall command us. So the people are going out into the desert. They're making a plea for Pharaoh to let them go. And they have to wait until God speaks to them. It's not necessarily that he's giving a command, but if we said before, if he always says something, then we should do it willingly. 2 Kings 8:19. Yet Yahweh would not destroy Judah for David his servant's sake, as he promised him to give him always a light and to his children. Another related word is emer, which is means words put together, and it's usually in a more poetic usage. In Genesis 49:21, Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. Clearly, a deer is not going to speak, so this is some kind of metaphor about the tribe of Naphtali. Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Yahweh, my strength and my redeemer. We're going to look at some cognate roots of Amar, and if you have seen the series which is Inside the Times and Seasons, when we did the Omer Reshit, the first Omer, the beginning of the counting of the Omer, then you will recognize that these cognates are related to Amar. We have Omer and Chomer. Omer is a sheaf, a dry measure, from a root that means to bind together. Ruth 2:7. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came, and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. Exodus 16:16. This is the thing which Yahweh hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man, according to the number of your persons, take ye every man for them which are in his tents. So this omer is compared to another measure, which is translated as bath, in Hebrew it's bat, and this omer is 1/10 of that bath. Chomer is a root that means clay or mortar, any kind of heap or a mound, and it's also a dry measure. Genesis 11:3. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. Isaiah 45:9. Woe unto him that striveth with his maker. Let the potsherds strive with the potsherds of the earth. Shall the clay say to him that fashioneth it, What makest thou? Or thy work? He hath no hands? Leviticus 27:16. And if a man shall sanctify unto Yahweh some part of a field of his possession, then thy estimation shall be according to the seed thereof. A chomer of barley seed shall be valued at 50 shekels of silver. But this is actually a different measure. This measure is equal to 10 baths. The omer with an ayin is 1/10 of a bath. This is 100 times bigger. This is worth 10 baths. Habakkuk 3:15. Thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses through the heap of great waters, as the waters were piled up on either side of the Israelites walking through. As I said, these words are very, very similarly used, davar and omer. There is a very slight difference. If you go into the Paleo-Hebrew, you probably could find some more deeper differences. This is not my field of expertise. I'm just going to tell you about what I do know about the difference between these two words, davar and amar. Actually, we have a very similar difference in English. Davar is the root to speak, which does not require an object. I can just say, I'm speaking, or I spoke. This is a complete sentence. But amar means to say, and it is a verb that requires an object. In English, I said, blah, 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 blah. I need to put the words that I said. The very basic meaning underlying davar is an arrangement of words creating an order and combining the separate items into one. So we want to look at it from that respect. It's a word for speaking, for sounds coming out of the mouth, where things combine into one. So a davar can be not just one word. We talked about Aseret HaDibrot, which is what people call the 10 Commandments. It's the 10 sayings. There's not just 10 words there, but each group of words is combined to have a meaning. Each one is combined to one. On the other hand, amar is more about the organizing of the words so that we can understand them. And we see that in the idea of the heaps or the piles and the omer and the chomer and the measures. As we're measuring, for example, a cup of rice, we're not going to count each grain, but we're going to take the whole thing as a whole. In comparing the usage of the nouns, the word davar, which is translated word, is used 1439 times in Tanakh, and imra, as the word, is only used 37 times altogether, and 26 of those times is in the Psalms. But in terms of verb use, davar as a verb is only used 1143 times, while the word amar is used over 5,000 times. So it's much more common for the verb to speak to be used, for amar to be used. Now, the verbs are used very often in conjunction, and there's a phrase that's used over and over in the Torah, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, and we see both the verbs there, Vayidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, and he spoke to him, saying, and then he gives the words that he's going to say. If we go back and look at some of the words that were associated with davar. The idea of combining things into one, we might get some more nuance from that. So we looked at Midbar, which is in the wilderness. And when we think about what were the people doing in the wilderness, Yahweh was speaking to them, Midaber, as we said, but he's also combining them into one nation. They came down as a family into Egypt. They went out as a nation, and then he's molding them together to be able to go into the promised land and take the promised land. We talked about the word Devorah, which means bee. And one bee is something, but the idea of bees is the hive, where they go and they make the honey, and as a collective unit. So the idea of combining things into one, we can see these in both of these related words from Davar. In terms of organizing for comprehension, the Omer, as we said, for like the sheaf of wheat, or the Chomer, which becomes the clay, when we see one of these things by themselves, it's just not that important. But when we see them together, we say, oh, a sheaf of wheat. We can understand it better. So that might give you a little insight. One more thing that's an interesting relationship. When we talked about Davar, we talked about the Aramaic being Dabar, from the sun or of the sun. There's a word which comes from the word Amar, which is used in the Targums and other post-biblical texts, and that is the word Memra. And the word Memra comes from this root Amar. And the Memra is the manifestation of divine power. If you look in the Targums, you will begin to see there's many places where the Torah just says something about Yahweh, but the Targum translates it as the Memra of Yahweh, or the word of Yahweh. So both these words have very strong affiliations, connections with the Lord speaking. What does a speech mean in the spiritual life of a believer? Yahweh speaks in us to us in order that we might listen and understand. He is a God of order, and his commandments give order to our lives. In Deuteronomy 30, verses 11-14, it is written, "For this commandment which I command thee this day, it is not hidden from thee, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven, that thou shouldst say, Who shall go up for us to heaven, and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea, that thou shouldst say, Who shall go over the sea for us, and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it? But the word is very nigh unto thee, in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it." So as we follow the commandments of Yahweh, as we listen to the things that he said, it gives order to our lives. We're supposed to listen to it, understand it, and be obedient to it. Yahweh also has a just system of measures. In Mark 4:24, it says, "And he said unto them, Take heed what ye hear. With what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you, and unto you that hear shall more be given." So the idea of Amar, Chomer, there's a measure there that works not only between us and the Lord, but between man and man. I'm sure that there are other inferences that you can draw out as you meditate on these words and these verb roots. In the meantime, Tasim et ha'inayim al hashamayim, keep your eye on the sky, your redemption draweth nigh. Shalom.